This is the story of Daniela and Ted, a story about a love that once seemed unbreakable, a beautiful home filled with dreams, laughter, and plans for a future together. But one morning, a single message destroyed everything. Ted begged for forgiveness. Daniela gave their family another chance. Their son Michael was born, and for a while it seemed like the worst was finally behind them. But can someone who betrayed once truly change? Can you ever get back what you destroyed with your own hands? Can regret rebuild a broken family? And why does the pain of consequences often become far greater than the temporary pleasure that caused them? This powerful story explores trust, family, loyalty, forgiveness, and the true cost of betrayal.
Love Stories Max. Welcome to my channel. Enjoy watching, friends.
After cheating, he lost everything, but realized it too late. An autumn morning was slowly waking up over the American city of Asheville, North Carolina. The sun was just beginning to touch the golden leaves on the trees, while a gentle breeze swayed the maple branches beside a large, bright house on a quiet street. That was where Daniela and Ted lived. They had been married for 2 years. For many people, 2 years is only the beginning of married life. But for them, it had been 2 years of genuine happiness. They had made it through sleepless nights because of work, home renovations, and little arguments over dirty dishes and forgotten lights. But somehow they always found their way back to each other. Ted worked as a senior accountant at a local manufacturing plant. He was intelligent, calm, and dependable. Management respected him, and his co-workers often came to him for advice. Daniela had worked as an interior designer until she went on maternity leave. Now she was 6 months pregnant, and she was happy, incredibly happy. Their house was exactly the home they had always dreamed of. A spacious 2-story house with bright walls and enormous panoramic windows. On the first floor was a large living room with a fireplace, a soft cream-colored sofa, and bookshelves that stretched all the way to the ceiling. Next to it was a kitchen with marble countertops and a large wooden table where they drank coffee together every morning. The second floor had 3 bedrooms. One was theirs, one was for guests, and the third was already becoming a nursery. Clouds had been painted on the walls. A small white crib stood by the window. A plush teddy bear sat in the corner. And children's books were already lined up neatly on a shelf. Daniela often walked into that room. She would sit in the rocking chair, place her hands on her belly, and smile. She imagined tiny feet running through the hallway. She imagined the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the house. She imagined their little one running into their bedroom early in the morning. She imagined decorating Christmas trees together, teaching their child how to ride a bicycle, walking them to school for the first time. In her mind, she saw an entire future, a beautiful future, their future. She was certain Ted wanted it too. That was why that morning became the end of her world. Ted woke up at 6 as usual. He kissed his wife on the forehead, put on his running clothes, and went out for his morning jog. Daniela slept a little longer, then slowly got out of bed. The baby inside her was already beginning to move. She smiled. "Good morning, little one." About 40 minutes later, Ted came home. He was in a great mood. He set a bottle of water on the table, dropped his phone beside it, and said, "I'm going to take a quick shower." "Okay, sweetheart." She was already making his favorite omelet. Ted headed upstairs. A few seconds later, she heard the water running. Daniela chopped some cheese, then tomatoes, then fresh herbs. And at that very moment, the screen of Ted's phone lit up. One message, then another, then another. She had no intention of looking. She never had before. They trusted each other. But the messages kept coming. And then she accidentally noticed the sender's name. Katie Redheart. Daniela froze. Her heart suddenly began beating faster, much faster. The phone wasn't locked. She didn't even realize when she picked it up and opened the chat. First, she looked for an explanation, a joke, a misunderstanding, anything that could explain what she was seeing. But with every new message, Her world crumbled a little more. "I miss you. Last night was incredible. I can't wait until we're alone together again. Your wife doesn't suspect anything, does she? You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Everything blurred before her eyes. The phone trembled in her hands. Or maybe it was her hands trembling. She couldn't tell anymore. A crushing weight settled on her chest, as if someone had placed a giant stone directly on her heart. She couldn't breathe. Only one word echoed inside her mind. "No! No! No!" The omelet continued cooking. Then it started burning. The smell of scorched eggs filled the kitchen. But Daniela didn't even notice. She sat at the table and cried. Silently, her tears fell onto the phone screen, onto her hands, onto her belly, onto their unborn child. With every passing second, she realized that the man she loved more than anyone in the world had been living a double life. Ted came downstairs a few minutes later. He was drying his hair with a towel and was about to say something, but stopped. The kitchen smelled of burnt food. The omelet on the stove was blackened, and Daniela sat at the table, crying, pale, holding his phone. He understood everything instantly. Everything, down to the very last detail. The towel slipped from his hands. For several seconds, they simply stared at each other, and those few seconds felt like forever. "Daniela," her voice trembled. "Why?" Just one word carrying more pain than 1,000 screams. "Why would you do this to me?" Ted remained silent. "I'm carrying our child." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I loved you more than I loved myself." She placed her hand on her belly. "I was building a future for us." Her voice broke. "And you were cheating on me." Ted lowered his eyes, and somehow that hurt the most. Not the affair, not the messages, not even the betrayal itself, but the silence, because silence meant the truth. 3 hours later, Daniela was packing her suitcase. Her hands trembled, but her decision had been made. She couldn't stay. Not now. Not after this. Ted tried to talk. He begged her to listen. He said he had made a mistake, that things had gotten out of control, that he didn't want to lose her. But Daniela could no longer hear him, because one thought kept destroying her from the inside. He had seen her pregnant, seen her happy, seen the nursery, seen all her dreams, and he had still betrayed her. That was what shattered her soul. That evening, she stood outside her parents' house on the other side of Asheville. Her father silently carried her suitcase out of the car. Her mother saw her daughter, saw her tear-stained face, and instantly understood. Daniela collapsed into her mother's arms, and for the first time all day, she allowed herself to truly cry, loudly, painfully, desperately, as if her heart were being torn from her chest. And somewhere far away, across the city, a man remained inside a large, beautiful house, and the nursery, empty, silent, without the sound of a child's laughter, without tiny feet running through the halls, without the future they had once built together. And neither of them knew yet that this was only the beginning of the story. Sometimes one betrayal destroys a family forever, and sometimes it becomes the beginning of a long journey through pain, guilt, and forgiveness. But that evening, Daniela knew only one thing. Her heart was broken, and for the first time in 2 years, she fell asleep without the man she had once believed would be her forever. Several months passed after that terrible morning. Ted never gave up. He called Daniela every day, sent countless messages, drove to her parents' house, begged her to give him 5 minutes, begged for another chance. He cried, he swore, he promised. He said he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Daniela looked at him and no longer saw the man she had once loved. The trust was gone. But alongside the pain in her heart lived something else. Their child, their future son. And one day she agreed to come back. Not because she forgave him. No, she never truly forgave him. She simply decided to leave that horrible morning in the past. To try moving forward. For the baby. For the family she had always dreamed about. When their son was born, Ted cried right there in the delivery room. The first time he held the baby in his arms, tears streamed down his face. They named him Michael. Little Michael became the center of their universe. For a while, it seemed life was finally healing. Laughter filled the house again. Toys covered the floors. The refrigerator became covered with baby pictures. Ted came home from work and spent hours holding his son. And Daniela watched them together and allowed herself to believe that the worst was finally behind them. For almost a year, they were happy. Almost a year. But some people never truly change. They simply learn how to hide who they are. While Daniela devoted every second of her life to Michael, while she woke up night after night to feed him, while she sacrificed sleep, rest, and even parts of herself, Ted began spending more and more time away from home. At first, it was extra hours, then entire evenings, then weekends. He always had an explanation, a new project, financial audits, emergency meetings, additional responsibilities. And Daniela believed him because she wanted to believe him, until one evening when the truth knocked on her door again. Cruelly, mercilessly, just like before. This time she didn't cry from shock. She didn't search for excuses. She didn't look for explanations. She simply stared at the messages on the screen and felt an old wound reopen, a wound that had almost healed, a wound she had carried inside her heart all along. Ted was cheating again. After all the promises, after all the tears, after all the vows, after the birth of their son. And in that moment, Daniela understood something. A person can forgive a mistake, but they cannot change someone's character. And this time, something inside her died forever. When Ted came home that night, she was already packing, just like before. Only this time, Michael's little suitcase stood beside hers. Daniela, please wait. She didn't even turn around. Don't. I can explain everything. No, Ted. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. The first time, you broke my heart. She zipped up her suitcase. The second time, you proved it wasn't a mistake. She finally looked at him. This is who you are. Ted said nothing, because he knew she was right. I don't want to spend the rest of my life waiting for the next betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to fall asleep wondering where you are. She glanced toward Michael's room. And I don't want my son growing up believing this is what a family looks like. That night, Daniela left their home forever. She buckled Michael into his car seat and drove across Asheville to her parents' house. Again, her father quietly helped carry the bags inside, and her mother wrapped her arms around her daughter just as tightly as she had a year before. Only this time Daniela cried less, not because it hurt less, but because there were almost no tears left. She had lost the man she once loved, but she had saved herself, and she had saved her son from growing up beside a man who never learned what loyalty truly meant. That night, Michael slept peacefully in his crib, and Daniela sat by the window looking at the stars. Her heart hurt. It hurt terribly, but for the first time in years, she felt something else. Freedom, because sometimes the most painful decision becomes the beginning of a brand new life. 3 years passed. 3 long years since the evening Daniela finally closed the door on her past. A lot had changed. Most of all, Daniela had changed. The pain didn't disappear overnight. It lived inside her for a long time, for months, for years. But little by little, the wounds began to heal. First, she learned how to wake up without crying. Then she learned how to smile again. And one day, Henry entered her life. He was nothing like Ted, not even close. Henry wasn't a wealthy executive. He didn't drive expensive sports cars. He didn't wear designer suits. He owned a small bakery in Asheville. Every morning he woke up before sunrise, mixed dough with his own hands, baked bread, rolls, croissants, and the entire neighborhood woke up to the smell of fresh pastries. Henry always smelled like warm bread, cinnamon, vanilla, home. That was why Michael loved him almost immediately. Henry never tried to replace his father. He simply showed up every day. When Michael fell off his bike, Henry picked him up. When thunderstorms scared him, Henry sat beside his bed. When he couldn't tie his shoes, Henry patiently taught him over and over again. Without even realizing it, Henry became a father. A real one, not because of blood, not because of paperwork, but because of love. A year after their wedding, Daniela gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Grace, and their home became even happier. The mornings smelled like fresh bread. Grace's laughter filled the kitchen. Michael ran through the yard, and sometimes Daniela would stand there looking at them all and wonder how life had somehow given her a second chance. She no longer lived in fear. She no longer checked phones. She no longer waited for lies. She no longer woke up in the middle of the night with anxiety. She was happy, truly happy. One spring morning, her phone rang. The screen displayed a familiar name, Ted. She stared at it for a long moment, then answered, "Hello. Hi. Could I spend the day with Michael?" Daniela was silent for several seconds. Then she said, "Okay." Ted thanked her. A few hours later, he arrived. He had no idea that day would change him forever. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw Michael in the yard. The boy was laughing loudly. Henry stood beside him. The two of them were flying a kite together. "Higher, Dad. Higher, Dad." That single word hit Ted harder than any punch ever could. Michael didn't even notice him right away. He was too busy having fun. Henry laughed, raised the kite even higher, then noticed Ted, and politely nodded. No anger, no hatred, no resentment. Somehow that hurt even more, because Henry wasn't trying to beat him. He was simply living and loving his son. Ted stood there watching Henry straighten Michael's jacket, wipe dirt from his knee, listen to his stories, laugh at his jokes. And for the first time, Ted realized a terrible truth. That should have been him. He should have been teaching Michael how to fly a kite. He should have been waking up to his son's laughter. He should have been holding little Grace in his arms. He should have been sitting at that table. He should have been Daniela's husband. All of it should have been his, once, but not anymore. Then the front door opened. Daniela stepped outside carrying little Grace. The little girl laughed, reached her arms toward Henry, and he immediately picked her up. As naturally as breathing, Ted watched them and felt something break inside him. Completely, permanently, because suddenly he understood. He was jealous of his own past, the life he had destroyed, the family he had lost, the people he had pushed away. That evening he returned to his empty apartment, sat alone in the dark, and stared out the window. No television, no music, no phone, just him and his thoughts. And for the first time in years, he admitted the truth. He hadn't only betrayed Daniela, he had betrayed himself. Every affair had taken something far more valuable than he ever realized. He thought he was gaining pleasure, freedom, excitement, adventure. But in reality, every betrayal cost him a piece of the future. The very future he once dreamed about. Betrayal never sends the bill immediately. It lets people enjoy themselves today. Then years later, the bill arrives. Sometimes it's enormous. Sometimes it's devastating. And sometimes it's a debt that can never be repaid. Ted understood that far too late. The moments of pleasure were long gone. He couldn't even remember most of the women anymore. But he could clearly see what he had lost. Michael, a boy who called another man dad. Grace, a little girl who might have been his daughter. Daniela, a woman who once looked at him as though he were her entire world. And Henry, a simple baker, a man who wasn't perfect, but who came home every night, who kept his promises, who loved his family. And that is why the greatest tragedy of Ted's story was not that Daniela left him, not that Michael barely remembered him, not even that another man became a father to his son. The greatest tragedy was that every single loss came from his own choices. Because sometimes people spend years believing they are deceiving others, only to realize one day that the only person they truly deceived was themselves. And that kind of pain is far greater than any punishment, because there is no escaping your own conscience.